Another powerful pivot table tool is the ability to group data together. And what this lets you do is define custom collections or groups of values and analyze them as a bucket rather than individual items. So to show you an example, let's start by only showing movies with the word star. And here you can see that we have a number of films in the Star Trek series and a number of films in the Star Wars series. So right now our data is at the title level, meaning that these revenue and budget numbers that we're looking at are specific to each individual title within those groups. Now if we wanted to lump or group those together and analyze them at a broader level, what I can do is actually just select the fields that I'm interested in. Let's start with these 6 individual Star Wars titles, and I can either go into my Pivot Table Tool Analyze tab, where you can find the Group pane, or I can simply right-click and choose Group option. And when I do this, it's a little bit confusing at first, but essentially what Excel did was create a second iteration of the title column called Title 2, which groups those selected titles into a new custom group called Group 1. And you'll notice that for all of the other titles in the pivot that I hadn't grouped, you see the same name for both the title column and the new Title 2 column. So I can select where it says Group 1 and give it a more meaningful name, like Star Wars for instance. And similarly, I can go up to my Title 2 column header and change that to something like Group Title, which is a bit more intuitive. And even though I had only selected the Star Wars titles as my first grouping, I can continue the process now and apply the same logic to something like Star Trek. And I'll just shift-click to grab all of these similar Star Trek titles, right-click, and group those, which creates a new Group 2 containing all of my Star Trek titles. So I'll go ahead, same idea, rename Group 2 Star Trek, and there you go. And what's great about this is that even though this new group title field is dependent on my original title column, I can pull that original title column out of the pivot and only analyze my new group titles. I've condensed this view to only show a single line item for Star Trek and a single line item for Star Wars. So now these budget and revenue titles are inclusive of each title that falls within these groups. And then if you decide that you no longer want to group these, it's as simple as right-clicking the name, choosing Ungroup, and it will blow it right back out into the title level data. So I can do the same thing for Star Wars here, and there you go. So once I've done that, you'll see something interesting, which is that I just ungrouped the only 2 groups that we had created, and the column title reverted back to our original, which is title as opposed to group title, because we no longer have any grouped values in here. So a really cool option to aggregate your data and compare one group of values against another. So that was an example of how to group text-based fields. Next up, we're going to talk about how Excel deals with date grouping specifically.